What's up, guys? It's Nika Beer back with Shimotsuki. We're gonna be doing another anime and then manga breakdown. So, chapter 1090, Admiral Kizaru. What was your thoughts on this chapter?
I think it was an amazing chapter, and it did a lot of things very differently to what we've seen lately. But there were also some really old school kind of callbacks, like Luffy answering a Denden Mushi and doing the exact thing we always know he's going to do. And he's going to go, "Who is this? I'm Luffy. I'm the man who's going to be the Pirate King."
I love
and I
that
thought
so
that was
much
great
when he did that. I was like, that's such a Luffy move.
So there was a lot of nostalgic callback to older arcs, and then a lot of ways where that happened in a different way. So there was a lot of things that felt like Shibodi. Kizaru's here, Santamaru's here, the crew's all back together because we spent a bit of time separated. So there's a lot of like nostalgic things, and then a lot of very new age things. The gorosei having a conversation with Luffy, like. How many people thought this is going to be a thing in the next 5 years even still? Like, I thought it was still way down the line. But Luffy talks directly to all 5 gorosei right here. And that was incredible.
I didn't realize
so there's a lot of
I didn't think
stuff.
it was going to be all 5 until it showed the one panel. And I was like, holy crap, he's like calling all of them out pretty much. It's not just the one.
I mean, the one guy's
there.
on the ship. But they're all on the call, like absolutely. And he's like measuring up to them as a yonko. So this is like Luffy enacting himself as a yonko on the world, which I think is really cool. The same way that we saw Shanks recently, and it was the chapter's title was even like Yonko Crew, Red Hair Shanks or something. This is that for the Straw Hat Crew. We're seeing their world presence, and I think it's amazing after over 1,000 chapters to finally like see that properly,
That is one thing when I was reading it, I got really excited about. I was like, he is pulling a power move right now. Because he's like, I am Luffy. I've got your York here, and yeah, we're gonna leave. You're not gonna do nothing about it, basically. So it was like a real power move to the world government.
Yeah. To the world government, the gorosei, the admiral, the entire fleet surrounding them. Even Morgans and Vivi and Wapol heard that on the world's news ship.
That really, I think
that was cool.
That little panel is going to really turn into something because we know Morgans isn't going to say what happened exactly. He's going to put a little spin on it to make it seem interesting. And so I feel like Morgans is going to be like the determining factor because it said Egghead, this event will like turn the world upside down. So what Morgan reports will be what makes people either want to turn towards Luffy as we want to support Luffy possibly or support the world government as what I think is possible from that.
The thing is, he already wrote his story on this event before this chapter. He wrote it in 1089 where he said Luffy came in and captured Vegapunk. He kidnapped him. And Morgan set him up as this hero. Sorry, not hero. He set him up as this like villain against Vegapunk. And I think that's very interesting because that's the spin the world has already gotten on it before the Navy even contacted Luffy. What's his name? Jay Garcia Saturn was sitting there eating that sausage, which is canonically, I think, the second time we've seen that after Treble eating sausage or bread with a fork. It was weird. But when he was eating that sausage, he was talking about Morgan's article on this exact event. And I found that super interesting because nothing's happened yet, and Morgan's has already decided what's happened.
Yeah.
And then to the whole fleet and Morgan's, Luffy says, I'm here and I've allied with Dr. Vegapunk, and now, we're doing the whole siege thing. So, like, Morgans was kind of right, but Morgan spun it in the same way that the world government would have spun it, where Luffy went there and he allied or, kidnapped Dr. Vegapunk and then was at arms with the Navy. Because if you asked the civilians in the One Piece world, like, what's going on here? Like, why are the Navy against a Yonko who's teamed up with Vegapunk? Vegapunk's on the Marines side, right? Like, that's confusing. So he's already published in the newspaper what's happening here, and this is why it's so crazy, like the Dun and everyone reading the newspaper. This 17-year-old kid, so he was 16, Luffy, I found out recently, left on his birthday as he turned 17, like literally minutes into being 17, he's like, right, out on the adventure. Since then, they've read in the newspaper that he punched Garp at Marineford, Ace died, he was dead for 2 years, and then he came back. He took out Caesar Clown. There was the whole thing with he took out Doflamingo. He now took down Kaido. Like, Dadan and everyone reading the newspapers at home must be like, what the hell is this kid doing?
Yeah, we're like, it's only been 2 years, and he is like the number one enemy of the world
everything
here.
And now, in the current newspaper, Vegapunk, a name that has been like mystery to us for 25 years, Luffy has kidnapped Dr. Vegapunk, sweet old kind Dr. Vegapunk, on his island, and is causing trouble for the whole world. Like, it must be insane to be reading these newspapers, which is exactly what Morgans wants.
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder how he's going to spin whatever's going to happen here, because remember, it's going to have to either stay 100% consistent with the article that Morgans wrote, or the article's not really going to matter because Luffy's impact is so big. So either it's not really going to matter, or it's going to be really important to inciting that great war that starts at the end of the Egghead incident, or starts with the Egghead incident. So I think things are going to get really crazy from here on out.
Oh, you and me both. That is exactly the feel I got from it when I was reading it. Either this is... Like with Luffy, like you said, it's either going to be, well, like you said, he's going to do something where it doesn't matter what Morgan says. And Morgan's not going to really change what he says, I don't think. I think he's too prideful for that as a character. So he's going to keep
and
his,
as a
like...
journalist.
Yeah, he's not going to change what he says. So he's just going to make whatever story he wrote go with what he already written, so...
Yeah, twist it. Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think that's how he's been set up. And every time we've seen him. But it's just very interesting that he now knows about Im. Well, I don't know if he knows about Im because Vivi definitely doesn't know about Im. We definitely would have seen that reaction, right?
Yeah.
Because then you can't tell her without talking about King Cobra. But, like, that was the whole point of Wapo calling them to pick him up. So... what if Morgans finds out about the world government's biggest secret? Like, does he publish that, or does he wait until the right time? Like, that's the biggest scoop ever, right? Like, surely that's the thing that's going to incite the greatest war. Like, the Egghead incident is the catalyst here, because now Im is saying, wipe them out. So, is Im going to be known to the world in the next 24 hours on the One Piece world, or... No, it's the next day, so it's 24 hours. We're now at the event, so Im is like about to be revealed to the world, I'm guessing then, if Morgans is going to get this scoop.
That would be so crazy, though, because wouldn't they do everything in their power just to kill him at that point then? Well, if he let it out, he would definitely kill him, but it couldn't take back any of the damage that it caused. It would be permanent damage to him.
Vivi would just be like, cool, let's go to Luffy. Luffy will protect you, and I guess that's it, I suppose, because even at the cost of his life, Morgans isn't going to sit on that story for long. He may sit on it for, until the right time. But he's a journalist, first and foremost. He's going to publish the story.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess as soon as he does, then there isn't much of a reason for a newspaper, Like, maybe the newspaper doesn't exist if everyone is like, oh, there's an evil ruler of the world. Maybe we have bigger problems, so maybe he would postpone it. But the story, just for that once-in-a-lifetime story, I absolutely think he's going to publish it. Like, that's the whole reason we've set the whole thing up with Wapol. Wapol went from the Phantom Room to Morgans' ship with that information, so it's going somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
We did seem to get a bit of a catch up on what we missed on Egghead, with Luffy talking to Boa and people being unpetrified and people getting food. And, I mean, Oda seems to be explaining what happened in little bits, like Kaku very unnaturally mentioning, oh, I'm so ashamed of myself, even though I fought 2 seraphims all by myself. Don't get lost, reader. I fought 2 seraphims. Like, it felt very out in the open, but I mean, it's a good storytelling method to explain it all to us through the rest of the story, but I don't think we're getting a full Egghead flashback.
Oh, no, I don't think so. After seeing this chapter, I definitely don't think so. Because I think even you have, like, Robin sitting there being doctored by Chopper, if I'm correct. Yeah, so she's just like...
right in front of Lucci. Lucci's like 6 meters behind her. The dude who was so intent on killing her, he literally thought about nothing else.
Yeah, like... I can't remember where it is. Somewhere right in the. I feel like it's right there in the beginning. Yeah, they're like, "Oh, what are you doing, Lucci?" He's pretty much like, "I'm just chilling, bro." And I'm like, "No, no way." And then later he's like, "Hey, I got that information
Giving
to
all the
y'all."
info. I first thought he was giving the info to the pigeon, and then the pigeon would fly.
See,
And then I
yeah,
like started to look further in the chapter, and I was like, but the pigeon's still on his shoulder. So what moment could the pigeon have gone? And I'm an idiot because one, Denden Mushis exist. There's no need for Hattori to go and do that. Two, the Frontier Dome is up. It's the only
Yeah.
person who can seemingly get through right now is Kizaru. So like, no, he probably just used the Denden Mushi.
yeah.
So for anyone else out there who was on some crazy different tangent on how Lucci contacted people, he definitely just used the Denden Mushi.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. See, my first thoughts when I say, I was like, is he telling the bird? Like, that was my same
Yeah.
thought, because he's turned to the bird, like he was speaking.
It
to
looked like he's like
Yeah.
talking directly to it, Yeah. Maybe it's just us being crazy. Something else. Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying, like, right here on the panel right below where it's talking about Lucci, all the CP0 agents are basically praising Luffy. So do you think that could be, like, added to his forces for this upcoming conflict?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because it's very much like all the other people that get saved by Luffy, and not even just Luffy, but like the Straw Hats in general. Like when on Zou they got saved by Sanji and all the other Straw Hats that were there. They ended up being on their side anyway, and they had deeper ties and whatever. But the Colosseum fighters in Dressrosa, like the what are they called? They had a very specific name. The guys, the Victim Society, or whatever they called themselves from Thriller Bark. They had a really weirdly cool name.
I can't remember.
It's a weirdly catchy, cool name, but I can't remember it. But yeah, like the crew feed and save those people, and then they're on their side despite where their standing is. The same way that Fujitora was fighting Luffy, and he was like, "Dude, you can't just stand there and fight me and say things that you like. You got to be serious and in your position." And then like that exchange softened Isho a little bit against the scum of piracy, and he felt a lot more because of that interaction with Luffy. So I think it's very much like that, especially when it comes to food.
Yeah.
Luffy's big on food, and Luffy's big on feeding. And if you feed Luffy, you must be a good person. They wouldn't feed us if they were trying to deceive us. So I think these guys are absolutely on the Straw Hat side. Also like Punk Hazard, the Marines at Punk Hazard, G5, the roughest Marines as well. That also, I mean, they were a bit, they even drew that battle line, but then I think Smoker was the one. But there's that same kind of dynamic. So I think these guys, they're going to play some kind of role. There's going to be some kind of importance, right? Especially because J. Garcia Saturn is like, sink that ship of survivors, kill those humans,
Yeah.
Forget about Lucci and Kaku, who cares? They're just humans. We can get more, like, Jesus Christ. But
You think this could start like an unsettling unrest in the government between like starting with the
Absolutely.
little bitty people, and it just like spreads like a virus that, hey, this Luffy guy's not that bad. Just like you're saying, this Saturn wants to kill, like he just said, kill us. And Luffy's like, well,
Just kill him.
I'm going to help y'all. Here's some food.
Yes.
Y'all help fight. And you can just do what you want to after that,
yeah, as long as you're not coming to attack us, I don't really care. But if you go all the way down to the conversation, it might have been last chapter, it must have been last chapter, where he talks about the humans as insects, right?
I think that was this chapter. Was it?
It was this chapter. If you go to that, wherever the hell that is, I'm going to try.
I'm looking
trying to
for
find
it.
Yeah, it is in this chapter. It's quite near the top, quite early. Look at Doberman, Vice Admiral Doberman's reaction to what he says there, where he's like, humans are no different from insects. Different translation, but even if their numbers reduce, they'll just multiply again. So he's just like, and the thing that I find very interesting
His reaction
is he talks about all this. He's shocked. Of course he is.
The way his face
Doberman.
is, the way he like looks down, he's like, I can't believe I have to give this order, type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas at least Kizaru's on the side where he's like, well, you'll just have to ignore him. And Kizaru's like, that goes against my morals. I'm like, this is the gorosei. When have they ever given a shit about your morals?
Yeah.
Like, is that a strong bargaining? I mean, it worked. He still had to go fight
that
him,
has
but
to give
you
you
know,
a little idea of like the authority and power that Kizaru probably has to be able to just say something like that. Because you see the other guys just like,
Yeah.
oh my god, okay, I'll do it, and he's just like, I don't really want to do that, man. And everybody
but
else
then he
just
accepts that he has to, you know.
yeah.
Especially, what did he say? He's just another cog in the machine.
Yeah.
Like, he accepts that part. But the thing is that I found incredibly interesting, Jay Garcia kind of says we have to protect 3 things, and he lists those things off. Everything else can be lost except for those. And then Doberman's like, but sir, Rob Lucci and Kaku and the rest of their squad is still there, along with the other Cypher Pole agents, you know, the 3s and the 5s and all those other guys. And he goes, oh, no, don't worry. I'm just considering the worst possible scenario. It's important that we prioritize the most important things. And he's like, oh, okay, I understand. And then he doubles down out of absolutely nowhere and goes, by the way, humans are scum and insects and you're replaceable anyway. Like, it sounded like he was justifying, and then he went flat out villain and then just said the evil things anyway. So, like, why were you placating?
No celestial dragon actually thinks much about humans, anybody other than themselves. Everybody's scum compared to them.
Except Mjosgard and the and Homing and the weirder ones, you know, the very outlier ones. But yeah, exactly. But then why try and placate, and why try and be like, oh no, I'm just prioritizing, if you're then immediately going to say that humans are insects? Like, that just felt very weird for me.
It's kind of like a morale thing
is
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That way you're not coming off to be like you're too big of a villain to your subordinates.
But then he does immediately after that. He goes straight into the humans or insects. This is a marine. It's not like he's a celestial dragon. He's talking to a human. You know? So why put up that, oh, we're not so bad, if you're going to literally in the same breath then go into the villain mode, you know? It just seems really odd. Maybe the official translation will clear it up, and he's just going to be a dick throughout the whole thing. I'm just kind of expecting that, but at the moment it feels odd.
Yeah, I agree.
But the original point to that was, I think them setting them up as these big villain types and like the really evil kind of things that they're doing here is what's going to make the Cypher Pole agents and everything go, hey, maybe this isn't a great situation. Maybe we'll go with the pirate instead. And that's a big part of the story between Marines and pirates and evil and justice and all that kind of thing.
What did you think about the fact that Seraphim Boa loves Luffy as much as regular Boa? Like that much of the DNA traveled through, and still that much of the original.
So even more interesting than that is Vegapunk's reaction to it, because Vegapunk was like, oh, very, very, very interesting. Let me write that down. Like, that's what is considered part of what's passed down. And that's very interesting because remember the thing we were talking about with Kizaru's lasers for the Pacifista? They're not the captured light abilities in the Pacifista. It's him replicating it. The same thing that he would have done with Kuma's Devil Fruit, because even though it's said to be like repelling, it actually gives like tangible form to pain and memories and things like that. Very interesting Devil Fruit. But Vegapunk copied that ability, and that's why the bubbles are so strong. So when he makes a clone of someone, he copies exactly what they are. But even Vegapunk doesn't know what that means, because he's still writing down things that are like, oh, the emotions towards Luffy for some reason is transferred down. Like, what did Vegapunk find out about devil fruits and people and souls and everything that he can do so much and make clones and make, you know, Lunarian clones and imbue devil fruits into people? But then this emotion thing comes through and he goes, huh, that's interesting. I didn't think that would happen. Like I found that very interesting.
It's like, that's strange. I don't remember programming her to act like that. So she apparently was supposed to be like a mindless machine, do what you're told, is what I assumed. But they like developed sentience from the original DNA, is what I assume.
Because so the really big thing about what Vegapunk is saying, I didn't program her that way, is she obeyed Luffy's commands. That's the big thing. Luffy said, hey, can you unfreeze my friends? You're the only one who can do it. And the engineered Boa Hancock with Lunarian DNA who was grown in a lab went, yeah. he's not Cypherpole, he's not Pacifista, Sentomaru, Vegapunk, Stella, or one of the Gorosei. Luffy isn't on the chain of command or have that little command chip thing. So why did Luffy asking him override every single one of those? Like, Vegapunk must be very curious as to what overrode his coding into that being.
Do you think that the Jinbei Seraphim would act similar, since Jinbei has so much respect for Luffy, that he would also respect Luffy in the same way and potentially be an ally, even though he's not supposed to be?
Possibly. I think it depends on the nature of inherent versus learned, in a sense, because like Boa and the lovesickness and everything seems very fate predetermined, like especially here because it happens to a completely different Boa that's cloned at a very different time in very different circumstances. So that looks like that's just gonna happen with Boa and Luffy, like that's just inevitable. But I don't know how that stacks with Jinbei's thing, because remember what he said to Ace in Impel Down? Ace was like, "Can you look after my brother when I die?" And he was like, don't overestimate me. I only will look after and do those things for people that I respect and people that I wholeheartedly believe in. Mm-hmm. He believed in Whitebeard. He fought for Whitebeard and he respected Whitebeard. But then he came to understand and respect Luffy. So if this Jinbei is that Jinbei, then yes, I agree. But if Jinbei's many experiences through life are what made him that way, then I don't think so, because I don't know how much this Jinbei, this Mihawk, all of these ones have the later memories. I don't know. I guess they would, because they have the same. They don't have the same scars, do they? I wonder how much of it is transferred. But I think Boa's one is a little bit different from the Jinbei one, as a first guess, because I would think that it was more experiential, that Jinbei kind of learned and grew and adapted over that time. I don't know if it's as much of his character as it is with Boa. It might be. It genuinely might be, but that's at least how I see it.
Yeah. I know right after that conversation we get, or it's not directly after, but it's really just a few panels after that. It's where they talk about Elbaf. I know for me, when I was reading it, I feel like my reaction was the same reaction Luffy and Usopp had. Like, they were the crowd's reaction.
Finally!
Yeah, finally. We've been waiting since this island. It's like, yes, this is exactly how we all feel.
Since Little Garden, which was a long time ago.
That was
like,
before
really long
Alabasta.
ago.
Yeah.
So long ago, man.
That was before Chopper, too, right?
It was before. I was about to say, because Nami got sick there from that fly mosquito thing. So that was before Chopper joined the crew.
That is so long ago. That's the second island in the Grand Line, right? They go to Whiskey Peaks and then there.
Oh my god, yeah. Well, barring any filler, but I do think so. So I want to point out something very suspicious here. There's been a lot of talk about Katarina Devon infiltrating. And I don't see any candidates that are necessarily great for that, other than the obvious, who was it who was acting strange? Robin was acting a bit strange. But putting all that aside, can we talk about Nami quickly? Bonnie was the other candidate. But let's talk about Nami quickly in this exact panel that you're talking about here. Remember how she's been, because I've talked about it a lot lately, that I actually really dislike Nami lately. Like, she's really irritating and aggressive and annoying, and like, she's mentioned like 3 separate times now, maybe we should just kill Vegapunk to get rid of him. That's very hectic for Nami, and I wonder if there's something unusual going on. But the most unusual thing is how suddenly positive she is. Yeah. Out of absolutely nowhere. She's hated Vegapunk and wanted to like off him to make this journey easier for like 10 chapters, 15 chapters now. And then Vegapunk's like, "You said your name is Nami. You're the navigator, right?" And she's like, "Yes. How can I be helpful? Yes, let's look at the things." Like, she's not shitty to him once. Something's changed here. And I think it's very suspicious.
Yeah, it's odd about Bonnie too, that since you brought her up, because they actually talk about it. Hadn't you wanted to kill him the whole time? You're like, "Oh, we're good." Like,
yeah,
maybe she got some grand conclusion from seeing her dad's like emotions and all that was in that sphere of that paw, maybe that gave her the closure she needed, which is my guess.
Absolutely.
But
that's what I was about to say. Closure is the perfect word. Because Vegapunk was saying the whole time, hey, Bonnie, wait, I can explain. Well, no, I can't explain, but here, I need to give something to you. The whole time, Vegapunk was just like, please, let me take you to Kuma's memories. That will explain the situation. It's not my place to tell you these things. And he said that like 8 times while she dragged him there trying to murder him, you know? But Vegapunk was candid from the beginning, like, hey, it's not my place to talk about it, but you should know, so here's the bubble that will explain everything to you. I think it's perfectly reasonable for her to be like much happier and all okay now. My concern is the fact that Luffy brought it up, because Luffy's not the most observant in the best of times.
Not at all.
However, he does have that emotional haki thing that Queen Otohime had, from my understanding. Like, he's very empathic with his opponents and his friends. Very much like the flashback to Rayleigh talking about Katakuri, or rather, you know, the empath thing about Luffy. So it makes sense that Luffy feels those emotions at all, but the fact that Luffy goes, wait, you were just acting different and now you're all happy. You were angry and now you're happy. You're acting weird. Like, that's a very unusual thing for Luffy to mention. So that's absolutely Oda pointing something very important out to us. So I wonder if Nami acting weirdly or Bonnie acting weirdly is... Do you think it's all cover for the possible Katarina Devon, like, invasion? Because that Blackbeard ship was here like 24 hours ago in the story, and then we never saw anything with that. Like, I wonder what happened there. Do you think anyone from the Blackbeard ship, possibly
I don't think
Katarina
we've
Devon,
even
is
seen
there?
Katarina in anything either, though, have we? Like when Law and Blackbeard clashed, she wasn't there. She wasn't there for Kobe and Garp.
Hachinosu?
Yeah, she
Nope,
was
she
not
wasn't
in any
there
of
either.
those. So it is a
Well, not that we
total
saw,
possibility.
But
Yeah.
Who else would be left on the ship, on that last ship that's here? It would be Lafitte and Devon. Like, everyone else is accounted for as far as I know.
Yeah. Katarina would be the best one to leave behind, seeing as she can replicate anyone, you know. She made Moria
she's
believe
better
she
to
was
send out, though.
Absalom, so...
Yes, but surely that's better to do a very particular invasion mission. You know, like... And she can replicate Devil Fruit abilities, right? Did she replicate Absalom's ability there?
I don't remember. Part of me feels
wonder
like
if
she
she
did, but I wasn't sure. I don't
Because
remember
that
what
was like
chapter
the-
it was either.
Was that like the proof that... Or was it Shiryu that became visible?
Shiryu
I'll
was
have to
invisible
check.
for sure. He definitely
But
can
I
turn
feel-
invisible.
I feel like the really... Oh, no, sorry. The good part about that Devil Fruit is it replicates their clothes as well. When you can use it properly, maybe it can replicate their Devil Fruits, because that's kind of what it means to copy someone. And when you eat a Devil Fruit, that thing becomes part of you. But if, like, Katarina Devon turned into me and could, like, replicate my clothes aren't part of me, but her Devil Fruit can account for that, as opposed to Bon Clay's, which can do the physical appearance perfectly. For some reason, it's kind of concerning, but it can't do the clothes. So
Yeah,
I
we
wonder
seen where he would
if
change his
either of
face.
them
He
can
still
do it.
kept his like outfit.
Oh, and he has to use it with his hands.
Yeah,
Katarina
specific
Devon
hands.
didn't seem to have that thing. Yeah, he had to like copy and then like paste, so it was specific. Sorry, let me just check this message. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. I'm just looking at some other stuff from the chapter real quick. Something that definitely stood out to me was right before Kizaru and Sentomaru clashed. And it's in like little fine print. You gotta kind of zoom in on it. It says Ojiki literally means uncle, but it's a Japanese word that mostly used to refer a Yakuza family's father or boss. And he says Ojiki as like maybe
Ojiki.
that Kizaru and him, or Kizaru and Sentomaru were possibly part of the underworld that Doflamingo was part of at one time?
I mean, maybe. I
Like, the
So there's
reason I even
two
think
different-
that's because, like, where it says Yakuza, like, it says
Yeah.
that, and, like, intentionally, you know.
But it might be more of a family kind of thing. Like we saw Kizaru hanging out with Sentomaru and Vegapunk here, and they seem to have very close ties, and they're all very strong. So it might be more of the same way that in the Straw Hats they call Jinbei Oyabin, which is it's like boss, because that's what everyone calls him, because he's the same kind of Yakuza boss, but not quite like Hyo, a little bit like Hyo, because Hyo is actually a Yakuza boss. But look at how Fishman Island look at Jinbei. He's that strong, respected pillar of the community, that top boss man. That's Oyabin. And even Robin and Frankie and Chopper and everyone on the crew calls him Oyabin, even though he's the newest, let's not call him a rookie, but the newest member of the Straw Hat Pirates. Kind of like Shanks' crew when Rockstar joined you, like one of the newer members. But everyone on Luffy's crew is a commander, except Luffy, weirdly enough. But I feel it's very much like that, where it's a respectful term for someone very high up and well respected for their role as like the leader or the strongest person or like the top. So I think it's somewhere between that formal ojiki or or son, kind of means like uncle, but like you call a random person when you're going down to the shop, oi, or son, like it's a bit disrespectful. I think it depends on how well you know them, but like it's a general term that shows respect or a bit of a casual relationship kind of thing. I think it's more of that than a serious mafia kind of style to it, because Jinbei isn't very mafia, he's very official, he's very strong, he's very respected, but he's not Beji, and he's not Drug Peklo and all the other people, and like Morgans was associating with and Stussy was associating with. I think it might just be a very respectful term that shows us that Sentomaru and Kizaru were once very close. The same way that, like, if I don't know who a great example is, maybe Johnny and Yosaku, if Luffy and all of them are all pirate kings of the new age, and Johnny and Yosaku had turned rogue and were attacking Zoro, and they attacked, Zoro would probably have a very casual kind of reaction to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He would be like, oh, Aniki, like the same way that they would refer to him with a lot of respect before, he would kind of turn that back on them and be like, oh, you've come to fight. Okay, well, let's do that. Like it feels very that kind of connection to me rather than a deep underground mafia kind of connection.
Yeah, I got you. Also, right before the last little panels, or it's in the last page, it says that Sentomaru, he's talking to Kizaru, prepare yourself, Sentomaru, and he says, my defense is the toughest in the world. Like
the
his
callback.
hockey being strong
No.
enough. Is that what
Sentomaru.
it was? Yeah.
No, Sentomaru.
Yeah, Sentomaru's hockey being the toughest.
Yeah, so this is a callback to really, 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 really long ago, where we first met Sentomaru and Luffy was fighting him. That's Sabodi, yeah. Shabodi, which I think means bubbly or bubble. Shabol. Anyway, and Luffy was throwing punches at him, and he was doing a very particular hockey technique, right?
Yeah.
We weren't really very clued up into hockey.
Yeah.
And not sure how well it stacks up, but maybe he's got advanced Conqueror's Haki or advanced Armament Haki or an advanced application. But we've seen this before because it's exactly what Rayleigh did against that first elephant, where he put his hand up and it flashed and did that whole thing. A lot of people see that as an early precursor to Haki rather than how we see Haki now. Mm-hmm. I think it's if you add a few auras, people will be like, oh yes, that's much better now. But I think it's very much the same kind of thing. He's got a very specific implementation of Haki, or he's got something Rokushiki-esque that's very similar, especially because he's a Marine. Very similar, but not quite the same thing.
Yeah.
Kind of like how, what's it called? Tekai gives you similar properties to Haki, but you can use Tekai and Haki. So it might be another one of those. But it was really good to get this kind of flashback because Sentomaru was a villain from very long ago who claimed to have the toughest guard in the world. And then he got destroyed by the Straw Hat Pirates. And then he comes back later and he says, I've got the... You know, he doesn't say it again, but we were so excited to see this toughest guard in the world. And he gets taken out by Lucci. So I don't have the strongest... You know, the highest hopes for the strongest guard in the world. But it has to mean something because it's... This very clearly shows us that...
He can't just give himself the title. Well, some people...
Yeah, and then lose 3 times.
Yeah. Self-proclaimed toughest.
Yes. But then Oda tells us that. Remember with Miss Bakin? Miss Bakin's title card, I don't know if it was an official translation or not. I think it was. But it says self-proclaimed... what is it? A lover of Whitebeard or something like that.
Yeah.
But he even mentions that it's self-proclaimed. But I think it's very cool to get the Sentomaru thing here because it's the really old, strongest god. And it shows us that Oda didn't just say that back then and then goes, oh, you know, that doesn't really fit with what I'm writing here. No, he doubled down. Oda was like, no, he says it again. He says the world's toughest defense. So it's going to mean something. But it was cool to see that with Kizaru's lightspeed kick.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I saw him do this with his hands, I knew what was about to happen. The Yata no Kagami. The mirror of God or the mirror of heavens or whatever that Japanese treasure's called.
Going,
does
I was like, he's finna teleport to the end of that and hit somebody.
Exactly, and it's great that you know that because that's what happened at Shibodi, and it's a callback to something that we referenced like 800 chapters ago or 400, 600 chapters ago or whatever it was, and it's so good to see all of these elements from all the way there. But with new, stronger Straw Hats.
Yes.
And all the way up to Luffy, messing around and having fun and bouncing around on the clouds, which is really cool. And then you get that final panel where he realizes that Kizaru's here and he feels that, like Kizaru's here. Oh my god. Kizaru's here. Sentomaru is here. This is where Kuma's memories and there's a bunch of pacifistas running around. There's so many things from that day that the crew got destroyed.
It's like a mirror of it.
So we got this really great panel of Luffy like messing around and the Straw Hats being strong and triumphant and battling against the Navy and everything. And then right at the end, we get Sentomaru versus Kizaru with those flashbacks. And then we have Luffy with that utter look of terror in his eyes, where he remembers the threat of Kizaru and I guess wonders how he's going to stack up against him.
Do you
now,
actually
2 years
think
later.
it was Kizaru that freaked him out a little bit like that, or do you think it was
Absolutely.
the Gorosei himself?
I think it was absolutely Kizaru. It would be very interesting if Oda did do a subversion like that where we're talking about Kizaru and he's dashing and then Sentomaru is receiving the attack. And then he masks that by having another invasion at the same time of being Jay Garcia, and then Luffy reacting to that. However, this doesn't feel like that to me, and that also doesn't make sense to me, because Jay Garcia was sitting on his ass eating sausages, and now he's going to go up and fight a Yonko? Like, he was just telling Kizaru, aren't you going to, like, go through the Frontier Dome since you can do that? Like, why would he get off his chair and jump in there? Like, he can't do anything unless... his devil fruit also lets him do that, and he was just making sure that he wasn't the only one going in. But you don't assemble 30,000 Marines and then send in the Gorosei, who also wants his position to be hidden, and the Admiral, Like, I think he just sent Kizaru in, and the light on Luffy's face is confirming that he is reacting to Kizaru's arrival, and an actually strong opponent. Because Luffy, I guess, wasn't aware that Kizaru was out on the ship. He couldn't feel his haki from that distance, I guess. But now that he's inland, he knows that Kizaru is there.
Like, if that's the case, that kind of craps on Green Bull even more than it already has been. Because I had high hopes for Green Bull. I still have a glimmer of hope that he's going to be cool. Or, like, stronger than one we think. Because we've only seen an exhibition of him. And we know Oda never shows everything in an exhibition. But
we've seen him twice now. like
Well,
kind
in
of
combat?
fighting. We saw him fighting Momo. Yeah, saw him fighting Momo and the Scabbards.
Yeah,
he
and
was
then
fairly
at,
strong. He took a hit from Yamato. That
Yeah.
was pretty impressive.
But like,
And then he
his
pissed himself when
reaction
Shanks
to
arrived.
but his reaction, like Luffy's reaction to Green Bull was like, oh, I thought I was going to have to come down there and help y'all. Hey, I'm glad I didn't. Ha ha ha! I'm laughing.
Yeah,
And
that's
then when he
right. I
sees
didn't even think of
Kizaru, It's
that.
like, oh my god, this guy's back. So it's like, are they
I think it's the
that big in
PTSD.
difference in power though?
It's the PTSD. It's Shibodi where this exact admiral arrived and pinned Zoro down and almost killed him right there. If Rayleigh wasn't right there, Zoro would be dead right now. Like that's just as simple as that. So I think it's more, especially remember in Dressrosa, he was like, it doesn't matter if they're Yonko or Admiral or whatever, bring on the fight. We need to be strong enough now. I think that's his attitude when he fights Ryokugyu, because he doesn't know anything about Ryokugyu. But when it comes to somebody who specifically destroyed his pirate crew 2 years ago and caused him all of that hectic PTSD, I think that's the big factor here. I don't think it's the strength difference between Green Bull and... why do we say Green Bull, but we don't call him Yellow Monkey? We say Kizaru.
I have no idea.
That's interesting. But anyway, Ryokugyu and Kizaru. I don't think it's the power difference. I think it's the PTSD difference in our not-so-joy boy.
Also, I was thinking while you were talking, while we said something about, like, Egghead being, like, a mirror of Shibodi. Do you think that Wano could have possibly been, like, a mirror of Thriller Bark? Because in Thriller Bark, you had a lot of random people come together to fight one big enemy, and at the end, it ended up being two. It was Kuma and Moria, and in Wano, it was Big Mom and Kaido. So does that mean the next arc after Egghead might mirror Impel Down or Kuja Island in a way, like with Elbaf?
I wonder, because I don't think it's going to be a straight mirror, although that would be incredible. But I feel like we would have seen that mirror before now, especially because we're in the final saga. If we had noticed this pattern at like the New World and we were like, oh, actually, if you go to these 3 arcs and then they mirror that way, like that's a lot more compelling. I feel like it's more that Oda's using elements the same way that, oh, the last one can be from there and this one can be from here, and then the next one we're going to be referencing things back to Alabaster. Like,
it's more like
I don't think
a
it's
full circle,
necessarily
is what you're saying.
Yeah,
making a full.
I don't
circle.
think it's necessarily going to be a straight symmetrical kind of mirror. I think it's more of a, things coming together to loop into one story and branch out into other stories that connect, rather than a flat kind of thing. Because Oda doesn't really do nice symmetrical lines, like I think the best thing we get there is like bounties, where you get like nice clean understanding that goes between numbers and that Gorawase and stuff like that. Almost everything else kind of mixes together in his own style, and things come back, like the beautiful swordswoman with meat. What a great prediction from Thriller Bark. It came true in Dressrosa. I don't know how mirrored those two things would be, but it comes back in a beautiful way with a beautiful swordswoman carrying meat who helps Luffy. Like, all of those things came together in a great way that gives you that callback to Thriller Bark. But we didn't need to set up 3 other things to preface it. We just did that one there. I feel it'll be more like that, where you can reference it back to there, but it's not going to be clean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I agree. I can get behind that one. Like with the final, like we all keep calling it the final war, but I really wonder what Oda's actually going to call this final thing, because we all call it the final war. We have been for years now, basically.
Years.
And
we had the Summit War, the Paramount War.
That's what I was getting to. It's not exactly a mirror, but the final part of One Piece has to be bigger than the Paramount. It has to be.
But Oda said that, didn't he? He said that when he writes the final war or the final saga, it's going to make the battle at Marineford look cute. Yeah. I know there's going to be a lot of dispute on the direct translation, but the message that I received from reading the official statement was that it's going to make Marineford in its chaos and all the moving parts that had to happen, like Luffy and the impel down and all the crazy coincidences that had to happen to make that the event it was, I think it's going to be even more than that. And I think that's achievable by Oda, because I'd argue we had that in Wano. If you look at all the little gears and cogs that made the raid work, it's insane. I've talked to a lot of people that say, oh, what was the point of Yamato? Did we really need Yamato there? And it's like, dude, there are so many things that only Yamato could have done, because she's Kaido's child and also Odin, and inspiring and protecting Momo, and like there are so, and met Shimotsuki Ushimaru and the other daimyo in the cave. There are so many things that could have only, and met Ace, could only have been Yamato.
Yeah.
And just that one character makes the raid work. Take that one character out and the raid would have failed. Take Otama out of the raid would have failed. Like, there were...
Easily.
Drake probably did a decent amount to help the raid, you know? Like, he only took down, like, what, one number and stalled Queen a little bit? Like, he didn't do much, but he contributed. Oh, no, he stabbed Guernica. That didn't really help. Guernica still went upstairs and interrupted Luffy, but, you know, he played his part for...
Yeah.
Luffy's awakening probably only happened that way because Drake fought Guernica and stabbed him. If he killed Guernica, Luffy would have just been killed by Kaido.
Yep.
Maybe there would have been no awakening, because it happened in a very specific way. So that's what I'm saying. Even Onigashima and the raid happened so specifically.
Took that hit. Like, when they done that final clash before his awakening, I was like, dude, Luffy... Oda, there's no way you're going to make this be how he's going to win this fight. I don't think that Overcon gun is strong enough to beat Kaido, because you've already tried to.
It wouldn't have beat him there.
No,
it wouldn't have beat him there. I think we know that pretty handily, especially because Kaido seemed to, what we're calling his awakening, he only seemed to really get truly into his strongest and biggest form right at the end of the fight.
Yeah.
When Luffy was like, I've got one more shot in me, Kaido looked like he was still ready to go for like hours. So I definitely don't think Luffy would have won that without awakening. Like, Overcon gun, advanced Conqueror's Haki, advanced armament Haki, all of that just, it wasn't enough. Kaido's a monster.
Yeah, I seen a video the other day. I didn't even watch it. I just seen the title. It said, I still put Kaido at the top 2. And I think that is
he's really strong.
Yeah, that's a good place to put him, because like, even with Gear 5, he still had to combine Conqueror's Haki. Like, I don't really, like, Luffy couldn't have fought that fight much longer, because he come out of Gear 5 and was like, all right, Heart, get back to pumping how you were in the manga. He's like, all right, Heart, I need you to do that thing again. We need to get back in this. And he, you know, just come back and beat him. And I don't think if the battle would have lasted much longer, that Luffy still wouldn't have won. I still probably think Kaido could still beat Luffy, like, from completely healed. Possibly.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because one thing I've noticed is, so we know that Luffy's gears have like limits on them. After a while of using gear 2nd, he would be exhausted, couldn't move. Yeah. After a while of using gear 3rd, he'd turn into Chibi Luffy. After gear 4th, can't use Haki for 10 minutes. That one was just a hard limit on how much you can use Haki in a time limit.
And we see ever since Dressrosa that time limit increases too. That he's actually gotten stronger. Yeah, like
decreases.
Yeah, the time limit that he can't use Haki, or how long he can use Gear 4 before that drawback happens, or it seems to have been that way anyway.
I read something recently that was a very interesting talk about that, because I thought that he just got used to the limits of Gear 4th and that's not a thing anymore, but I think he's just better at managing his time and disabling Gear 4th and going into it before he runs out, which makes sense. So the hard stop isn't actually gone, he just doesn't hit it anymore. But now the interesting thing is, Luffy going into his Gear 5th mode here, does that make him older when he goes out of Gear 5th and he does that whole thing? I don't think that's just from going into Gear 5th. Mostly because it's a zone transformation. Why would that tire you out? Like, any other zone can just change between their zone forms. Even Momonosuke, who didn't know how to do it properly, would just switch between them, you know?
Well, we know for Kid and Law, we haven't seen them use their awakening before Wano, and they say it wears you out. And maybe it's because they haven't had it long that it tires them out in that way. But you see somebody like Kaido, where we said it never said he's awakened, but his hybrid form has different looks in different parts. Yeah. So, and you don't ever see him tire out, you know. So it's probably like just like I've used it this much, I've trained this much, I'm this strong now, you know,
used
type
to
thing.
it.
Yeah.
So the limit is still there. He's just better at managing himself, the same as Luffy. So with Kaido, this last thing in the anime as well, something that made me feel it so much better. Same like King, when Kaido like drops to his knees and he's like exhausted and he's talking to Luffy, that made me understand that so much better. Because when I read that in the manga, I had such an impression of Kaido being like this monster, because I didn't see that as him being tired. He was just kind of like, ugh, you know, like, let's keep fighting this rubber kid. But then you watch it in the anime, he's like exhausted, you know, and I really felt that.
I got the same feel for sure.
So the interesting thing about the Luffy tiredness and the Luffy aging thing, the thing that I'm really starting to connect that to, is maybe it's not directly Gear 5. Maybe it's the Giganto form, because right after using the Giganto form, he powered all the way down, you know, and then he lost the Gear 5-ness. But that's exactly what he did against Lucci, because he was fighting in Gear 5, he was fine, and then he did the giant head thing so he could do the chomping thing, and then, I mean, they cut away from the fight, and he went onto the maglev train thing, and then he went out of Gear 5, and he got old. But that's twice now that Luffy's gone out of Gear 5 specifically after using the giant ability and then having a drawback. So maybe going Gear 5, you at least get a good amount of time before you hit that limit. But going Gear 5 Giganto, it's done.
That uses all your power limit up right there.
And he's not used to it yet, so that's why he's going to keep hitting this limit until he learns to pace himself and he learns to use his awakening more efficiently.
You even have to think about Luffy, like, he's able to grow his body so big now with his fist, but he's never grew his entire body to that size. So even if he has the capabilities of doing it, doesn't mean that he can sustain it, because he's never actually done it to that scale before.
Well, except that one time against Kaido, and then we saw that he hit that limit, because then he immediately went out of Gear 5 and Kaido
that's what I mean during that fight.
Yeah,
but like before, you only see like his hands get big or his foot get big, and not just
or
his
at
entire
most Gear
body.
4th.
Yeah,
like and even in Gear 4th, it was partial. Yeah, exactly.
It was only
and
like
even in Snake Man,
at a time.
And then Snake Man was much more balanced, but still didn't get the same effect. Giganto keeps his proportions and just makes him huge. So I think that was very interesting.
I find it interesting with the Giganto form with the hat that is in Mary Joie, because it's a giant straw hat.
That's very interesting.
When I seen that form, I was like, so was the original Joy Boy, could he sustain giant form, or was he just that big?
Was he just... So that was an interesting thing when Gear 5th first came out. I think I made a Reddit post about it at some point, where what if that's his full zone form? It doesn't make sense, because then he was tired out and then he shrunk all the way down. Oh, it's not. Sorry, just going through a couple of things in my head. So after he did the Giganto thing, he deflated and he did the whole air thing, and then he fell down, which is why Kaido was mentioning that it was like a comic book, right? Yeah. Did he specifically lose... He lost a whole bunch of air, which would mean it's not a zone form. Because I used to think, like, what if little Gear 5 Luffy is hybrid form Luffy, big Gear 5 Luffy is full zone form, and then he's got his regular one.
I haven't, for some reason, even knowing that's a mythical zone, like, hybrid has not come to my mind one bit. I have no idea why.
Why? Yeah, because is this hybrid or is this full zone when he goes into Gear 5? Oh, and also one more question.
Why would you unlock hybrid first, though?
Well, because you don't know that you're a zone.
Did it, you know, well, Kaku and them were already, like, they did it, so I don't know.
He actually got a pretty good handle on his fruit, considering he just ate it, which is very interesting. And then awakened it in 2 years, which is also very interesting.
He is a prodigy.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's because he loves giraffes so much. Giraffes are the best animals. Everybody knows it. But here's an interesting thing that I saw on Reddit, that a lot of people were like dogpiling. Whenever I've seen this, a lot of people dogpile and go, "Oh no, that's just utterly impossible." Like, we haven't seen Luffy use his Sun God Nika powers under the sun yet.
No, only
First,
under the moon.
it was at night, and then it was inside, specifically inside at the Fabrostratum floor. He's never been under the sun, and he's got the Sun God powers.
Escanor is what's going to happen. He's going to Escanor
It's-
everything.
So is the white form because he can't see the sun, or because it's under the moon? Because it looks just like energy steroids and Sulong form, but it doesn't look very sun god, does it? So is his power going to change and somehow be even more overpowered when he's under the sun, or does it need to stay the white for like the
I
cartoony
definitely
black and white
think-
kind of thing?
See, I think it's going to stay sort of kind of like that for the like tune and comic-y. But
Yeah.
I also know that there's no way that Gear 5 is fully developed.
No,
We will
exactly.
get more from it. Somehow,
We
Oda's
need
already
more.
got something. And I don't know if we'll necessarily get it. If he ends up fighting Kizaru or even takes on Saturn, he may end up
That'd be
like
cool.
further developing it even further. And I want to see him fight Saturn, even if he can't
would be
beat
really
him,
cool.
just to show where Luffy stands in that power struggle. I think would be kind of. It's not. It's
Very
kind of
interesting.
important. It is important, but it's not important. It can be shown later.
No, it's incredibly important.
to
Do
be
you know why
like-
it's incredibly
yeah.
important? Because that's the Gorosei that murdered Cobra with his tail. So Luffy, of course, has to
Yes,
avenge his
I forgot
crewmate's
about
dead
that.
family member by fighting the literal murderer of Cobra, is right here. So I definitely
forgot
think they
about
need
that
to
he was the
fight.
one that actually did it.
I think that was a very masterfully done scene, because a lot of people thought the tail was Imu, but when you look
No.
at the panel, I think it was absolutely
I don't think
Jay
Imu-
Garcia.
Yeah, it was definitely the Gorosei that did it. It definitely wasn't Emu.
Emu
herself.
was way up there,
Yeah.
really, really high up, and the tail came from behind Cobra. But that's a different discussion.